Welcome back. In lecture 8.1, we discussed the relationship between bond prices and interest rates. In this lecture, lecture 8.2, we are going to look at how the RBA affects the nominal interest rates via the target cash rate. We shall use the 90-day treasury bill market as an example of bonds market to illustrate how the RBA affects the nominal interest rate via the target cash rate. For a start, we shall assume that the 90-day treasury bill market is at equilibrium and the RBA increases the overnight cash rate. The final outcome would be a decrease in the price of bonds and an increase in the interest rate. We shall see the full analysis in the next few slides. Diagrammatically, the increase in the overnight cash rate would cause the supply curve to shift to the right and the demand curve to shift to the left. As a result, the equilibrium price falls from PE0 to PE1, and the quantity of bonds at the equilibrium will be QE1, decreasing in this case. We shall explain in details in the following slides. Previous analysis suggests that there are two markets where one can borrow or lend money. The overnight cash market, whose interest rate will be the target cash rate, let's call that RT, and the treasury bill market, let's call the interest rate the RB. So these two markets will therefore be substitutes. They will be substitutes, which implies that if the target interest rate rises, then borrower prefers to borrow from the treasury bill market. Borrower goes to the treasury bill market because RB hasn't changed. Now, let's apply this simple idea, and then we use the diagram to analyze and see how the previous diagram actually came about. Now, let's use the treasury bill market to illustrate. On the vertical axis is the price of treasury bills, and on the horizontal axis is the quantity of the treasury bills demanded. This is the demand curve, let's call that D1, D0, let's call that D0, and then let's call the supply curve S0. So this is the borrowers on the supply curve and the lenders on the demand curve. The market currently is at the equilibrium, and so we have Q0E, the quantity of bonds demanded, and then we have P0E as the price of the treasury bills or the bonds. Now, if the RBA increases the overnight cash rate, because as we said, the overnight cash rate and the overnight cash market and the treasury bill market are substitutes, this means that the interest rate in the overnight cash market is higher than the interest rate in the treasury bill market. Borrowers will therefore have an incentive to borrow from the treasury bill market. So the supply of bonds would increase. So we call that S1. The supply curve shifts to the right. The lenders would therefore not have an incentive to lend money in the treasury bill market, but instead would like to get a higher return from the overnight cash market. So demand for bonds will decrease. Shift the demand curve to D1, And now we have a new equilibrium where Q naught, QE1, and then we have PE1. So the price of bonds has fallen and the equilibrium quantity here has decreased. The interest rate has increased. Now note here, it is not automatic that the equilibrium quantity will decrease. The decrease in the equilibrium quantity will depend on the relative shift in the demand and supply curves. Here, by assumption, demand has decreased by more than the supply increased, hence the equilibrium quantity has decreased. We can have the equilibrium quantity remaining constant or the equilibrium quantity increasing. One thing is sure here, the price will fall.